available for 3 days and pass on protected cloud, and then it will come down and be completely deleted. Really, this time, Kawser, over to you.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I mean, it's absolutely an honor to speak to the audience here today. My name is Kawser Ahmed, and I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba. I teach as an adjunct professor at Political Science Department at University of Winnipeg, and also lead a not-for-profit organization called Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada. Thank you so much, folks, for turning out today. And I have prepared a PowerPoint, and I aim to take around 30 minutes to share my PowerPoint slides. And mostly, I intend to talk today about the conception of the project and how we came into this stage and what we are doing at this point in time, because this project is ongoing now and it is funded by Public Safety Canada through the Community Resilience Fund program. So without further ado, let's go over to my slide. And I just wanted to confirm if these slides are visible. Can you all see my slides?
Not yet.
Not okay. Just give me 1 sec here to put it up here. Where are you? Okay. Great.
There we go. Got it now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, folks, so the title of our project is, as you see on the screen, it is about countering radicalization to violence in Manitoba and a guide for the educators and practitioners. Those who have joined from USA and other areas, just to show you where we are located, I thought that it is a good idea to have the map. So here we are, the green part, and it's pretty straight, Manitoba, and surrounded by 1001 lakes. And Manitoba is sort of in the overall CVE environment in Canada, I would say pretty much in a low profile, because we don't have too many cases of extremism and terror attack. I mean, in comparison to the eastern and western shore, so we kind of in between pretty laid back situation. And this is one of the reasons that I came up with the idea of running a project like this through the educators. So today I intend to share with you, as you see on the screen, a couple of matters, the why part of the project, and moving on to the what aspects of the projects that I think is important, and how various part of the project we have come into fruition, and of course challenges and opportunities, followed by the current stage of the project. So just setting up the context, as I said, Manitoba kind of sometimes referred as hinterland. Nothing happens here except the snowstorms. And by the way, for your information, we are heading to another April blizzard in just 2 days, around 30-40 centimeters coming into our way. So just to give you a context that this is where we live. So when we started thinking about this project, several things happened in our province. And I just wanted to list some of them, not all. In 2018 and 19, we just saw a spike in bomb threats. And of course, all of them were fake, but in any ways, there were threats in the schools. Then we saw a very, I would say, an extraordinary amount of anti-Semitic graffitis in many of the places in the cities, and including universities and schools. Then we have that infamous case of Mr. Aaron Driver. If you know this person's story, he was recruited by IS, and then, I mean, of course, the enforcement agencies picked him up in time, but he somehow later on released, we call it a peace bond, and then eventually he blew himself up in Northern Ontario. So this is the extreme case that we have had over many years. And of course, in 2009 and 10, we have these 3 students of University of Manitoba joined Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. But over this past, I would say decade, Aaron Rever is the only case that we have who actually, drawn into IS, recruitment and then blew himself up. And of course, interestingly, we have seen a movement titled "It's Okay to Be White," and this particular movement. I use the word movement, but I'd like to say that this whole phenomena is still hanging on in our city and in many of these schools. And Idle No More is basically a indigenous movement, and it started in 2013, 14, but it has some connection with the ongoing It's Okay to Be White movement, because many of the proponents of It's Okay to Be White actually mention about Idle No More. So there is a tension between the indigenous population here versus the rest of the others. And of course, the big news is neo-Nazi group, the base, and its infamous recruiter, Sergeant Patrick Matthews. This case came into our notice in 2018-19 in that period. And one of the, his name is Ryan Thorpe, a Winnipeg Free Press journalist, who infiltrated the group and uncovered their activities. So the base and particularly its recruitment activities were noticed in the city. And of course, during the COVID period, we have seen the polarization and its impact, especially anti-vaccine, especially anti-government movement. And of course, when the project is about to be started, we have seen the Freedom Convoy and its impact in Manitoba as well. In order to set the context, I also thought that it is possibly relevant to talk about a very recent case that we have seen in Sweden, the city of Malmö, and many of you might have already noticed this event. But some of the findings that I thought resonates with our philosophy and idea of the project, and is there in the screen. And in that lengthy BBC report, various school teachers and psychologists, they have mentioned about the following aspects, as you see on the screen: the social psychological disorder, the active internet forums where people are sharing, young people are sharing fantasies of violence and anti-feminism. Then the right-wing extremists have made good use of Sweden's acceptance of immigrants. And then, of course, some of the teachers said that there was a mention about the event, and it was, widely shared that the boys in Sweden are feminized and not allowed to be boys, mentioning to the passive, posture to the extremism intervention. And of course, this particular report mentions about the pandemic and how it fired up the traffic in the internet, an inevitable trend. And just a couple of things also, that this event was widely shared, and people have expressed their sympathy, and especially referring to Andrew Breivik's shooting at summer camp, we all know, in 2011. And of course, in our Canada, the Quebec mosque shooting followed by the Christchurch attack. Of course, in that particular case, we have seen in Sweden that what I'm referring, that in many cases, there are cuts in the social welfare services. And this is what we also see in our case in Manitoba, particularly. There is hardly any resources put in the social service agencies to respond to anything of that nature. And the last point is also very important, which is actually one of our guiding principles, that how to really provide something which can support the care of the young people. And here is again the last part on this case, that Sweden thinks that the teacher union should be collaborating with the social services, psychiatrists, and law enforcement agencies. And when I'm going to brief you about our project, you will see exactly this is what we are going to do here. And also, the welfare services and rapid response system, which is not part of our project, but we think that moving forward, after the project is done here in Manitoba, we are going to recommend something of that nature so that the project and its output is followed through in the future. So I did my postdoctoral research from Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada. And at that time, I only spoke with the social science teachers because they teach these topics of global and social conflict issues and pertaining to my area of interest, extremism and violence. But I asked, is it the responsibility of the social science teachers only? Because teachers are many, and particularly in Manitoba, social science curricula is not mandatory for all. It's kind of, you can pick it, or if you don't want, you may not. So I was asking my research participants in that research that how come it is the responsibility of social science teachers only to talk about conflict issues and not others? And of course, we do have, province has its own instruction about curricula and how many of the components of the curricula to be taught. And if the social science curricula falls right into the province's direction. And of course, there is no mention of social global changes that we have seen over the past 2 decades. And so in 2018, the project actually was conceived from the idea of pedagogical intervention in schools. I thought that teachers are in the forefront, and that is why I came with this idea that how about reaching out to the teachers and asking them if they are equipped, knowledgeable, and confident talking about these matters and in terms of some bit of intervention. So we have a large group of teachers coming together yearly in Manitoba. It's called MSSTA. It's called Manitoba Social Science Teachers Association. Around 300 plus teachers, they gather yearly and they share their ideas, and there are a lot of things they do. So I kind of joined that group and presented my paper in 2019, and I have received a lot of interests and people reached out to me, and that is how I ended up in this project. And of course, I teach an undergrad level courses on terrorism and counterterrorism, and that gave me quite a bit of exposure to young people in the universities. And right from the beginning, the one idea I always carried is intervention and how early an intervention should be done in terms of radicalization prevention. And of course, the component of effectiveness. How do we really understand and measure the effectiveness of countering radicalization to violence? So our project we have submitted the project in 2019, and we got this project from Public Safety Canada, Community Resilience Fund. And the project architecture is basically composed of 3 phases. In first phase, we are going to, and what we are doing now actually, we have kept over 16 consultation meetings with the educators. So we have picked up around 14 to 15 dedicated educators teaching in the high school, middle schools, and also some of them are retired. So we made this core group of educators, those who are working with us through these consultation meetings to prepare the toolkit or guidebook. In phase 2, once we have this guidebook toolkit ready, we are going to go out and conduct over 14 to 18 workshops throughout the provinces. Our goal is to reach out to larger pool of educators in schools and share with them the toolkit and guidebook so that they are equally become knowledgeable. In last phase, we want to get back together whatever we have developed and the feedbacks received through the workshops and the meetings, and then we organize a national international conference for 4 or 5 days and gaining information and knowledge from other practitioners and researchers and fine-tune our toolkit and guidebook. And at the end, the output is the toolkit or guidebook, which will be available free of cost, both in electronic and print media. So we think and we believe that the project design will be beneficial for the educators from kindergarten to grade 12, private and faith-based schools as well. And we are targeting around 15,000 plus students within this group. Those would be in direct contact with the educators, those who are going to be trained through our project. So here, as I just mentioned, that the rationale is here, the way we have understood is that educators are in the forefront. They have understanding about ongoing extremism, and they do face a three-way challenge. First is they feel hesitant to speak about the phenomena itself. And during these 4 meetings that we have had so far, we have exactly learned that many of the teachers don't feel confident about talking about extremism, white supremacy, neo-Nazi, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, so on and so forth. And also, one of the problems they share with us is that they don't want to talk about these hot button issues because they believe it would further, start controversies and will become political in discussions, and that might upset some of their students. And the last challenge that they mentioned is that although some of them are willing to talk about it in a very collegial manner, but they're not supported by the administrators. When they bring something to the administrators in the school, majority administrators advise them to avoid the matter and refer it to the parents and guardians. So in our project, there are two key components, as you see on the screen. One is content development through educators and stakeholders. Just a couple of words about stakeholders. In our project, it is not only the educators that we are trying to build our toolkit with, but we have earmarked a number of stakeholders, those who are also coming in with us and educators together to share their ideas and feedback. So these stakeholders are ethnocultural community leaders, school administrators association, then parents and guardian association, then law enforcement agencies, especially Winnipeg Police, the Winnipeg City, and we are trying to reach out to the province so far unsuccessfully, but hopefully they would be on board. And also the expert groups. For example, in Canada, there are a number of projects that, I'm sorry, the public safety has run. So we have a lot of expertise. So they are also coming in together to consult and advise us. And of course, as I mentioned briefly, that we are very much relying on the trainer component in the second phase, where we'll go province-wide and educate teachers. I'm sorry. So here in this slide, briefly, I go a little bit details about how we are going to do it. It's very inductive process. We do not have any prescription at hand. We do not have any guidelines even. So we just gather together, we talk about it. We ask teachers, what do you think? How do you want to handle these issues if some of your students come up with these things? So it's kind of getting things done through them, and so that they are comfortable. So a series of consultation meetings are being held, and we are connected with the stakeholders. The whole project is very much grounded within Manitoba. And Manitoba has its unique socio-political context. As I have rightly mentioned that in the beginning, we have large Indigenous population here, second largest actually in Canada of reserve Indigenous population. So we have that angle to our extremism and extremism phenomena. And of course, we would like to build a knowledge sharing network through this project, because stakeholders are connected, educators are connected, experts are connected. So this network is our actually strength of this project. As you see from the title and my a little bit of discussion, that Toolkit's guidebook is our output. So at this point, we are consulting UNESCO's teacher guide, Anti-Defamation League's Extreme Measure Toolkit, Canadian Anti-Hate Networks Confronting and Preventing White Supremacy in Canadian Schools, and Western State Centers Confronting White Nationalism. And particularly, I spent a couple of weeks with Western State Centers Summer Institute in 2021 to learn myself, actually, and immerse myself with the ideas of educators in the States. And of course, we do have that component of conspiracy theory tracking and how to deal with digital literacy amongst the teachers. Gentlemen, ladies, we are not in the business of reporting. And we have made it very clear right from day one. Unlike the channel program in the UK, we have no business of picking up students and reporting to somewhere else. We are going to deal with ourselves. Now, you might wonder whether it is part of our project. At this point, no, we have not discussed and devised anything how to deal with these things directly when it appears. For example, like cases of potential extremism and so on and so forth. So we have not gone into that discussion as of yet, and we think we will develop something in consultation with stakeholders and educators later on. Our main focus is educate teachers and empower them with this knowledge that they understand signs and symbols. For example, in the past Freedom Convoy movement, you might be aware that we have a large group here. We have had, and Emerson border was closed. The group was demonstrating in front of legislative building for almost a month. So there were a number of flags we have seen, symbols that were drawn on the snow came out. So our teachers asked, what does it mean? How do I understand this symbol is relating to white supremacy or neo-Nazi or something else? So we are in the business of educating them, empowering them with this knowledge, authentic knowledge. And we want them to consult with us when they see something and they want to talk to us and understand what does it mean, what is the implication of those, let's say, some of the narratives, some of the symbols they see online or offline. And that is how our knowledge will be kept in a database and which will be accessible through an app, and email, and phones. Now let's focus on challenges. As I already repeatedly said that the project aims to train educators in Manitoba, and they will be able to develop and run the workshops themselves. But already we are sort of understanding the challenges itself. First is a broad agreement about the contents of the toolkit. So the discussions that we have had so far is going well, I would say, because we have majority consensus. But also the point is not all the educators, stakeholders will agree about the content. And this will be an ongoing exercise, as I believe, and we'll see at the end of first phase what we come up with. Another question or challenge that we have seen is the question of how to use this knowledge. So yes, educators are trained, knowledgeable, and empowered through this project, but how the educators will use their knowledge with their students in terms of prevention. And third challenge, I would say, getting the province and the city on board, because in our province, there is no, I would say, interest with regards to extremism prevention from the city and province officials. And finally, I think we are yet to decide about the dissemination platform from where we'd share our knowledge, whether it should be purely online, electronically, or print-based. However, we see opportunity through this project in terms of extremism prevention in Manitoba, because you can see the list of stakeholders that those who have already signed up with us. We have had the first meeting on 31st of March, where we have all these groups present voluntarily, and they spent 4 hours with us sharing their concerns, their eagerness that this project is much needed, what we call a whole of society approach. And this is what we think of an extraordinary, I would say, collaboration and buying in with this group, the idea itself, because oftentimes we find that people shy away, talk about radicalization, even accept the presence of extremism. So here's the current stage. Since January 2022, we have had 4 educators meeting and 1 stakeholders meeting. In each educators meeting, we bring experts throughout the world. And so far we have had 4 lectures, and these are all available in our website. We have social media platform, and we are just in the developing stage of a iOS and Android based app, which will contain all the knowledges that I spoke about. So folks, once again, let me conclude here by saying that we think this project is important for 2 reasons. One is building a consensus amongst teachers and stakeholders and acknowledging that we have a problem, because that is the first thing which is really difficult. In 2018 and 19, during my postdoctoral research, I had difficulty in kind of building a consensus about the issue itself. So this first thing we have already achieved to a certain extent. And second point is we think that it is important because it is going to produce some ideas, authentic ideas and knowledge for our educators who can convincingly use them, confidently use them for purposes they think and they think they should do. So for these 2 reasons, I think our project is important. This project will be run for 3 years. It will be ending in 2024 March, hopefully. So follow us. We are here, perin.ca.org, and we have a Facebook page and Twitter. We just started just 4 months down the road. So hopefully with your suggestions and cooperations, we'll do much better in the future. And once again, thank you very much, Matthew and Lauren, for allowing me to come and speak on this topic. And I'm really privileged. So thank you so much once again.
Kawser, thank you so much for the presentation. You can take the slide down for the Q&A discussion. Lots to talk about. Really, really interesting. Let me kick it off with just a couple of questions. I've got already a bunch that looks like all came into me directly. Feel free to ask your questions in the chat function. If you're comfortable, put them in publicly to everyone, and if not, you can send them to me directly and I'll ask them without reading your name. So a couple of big points. One is, can you speak a little bit more to what it's like and what your strategy is to kind of win over, in particular, administrators and parents? We'll get to the teachers in a moment, right? Administrators and parents. I can see them both seeing a utility in a program like this, and I can see them both completely freaking out over a program like this. And I imagine it's a very different experience with each of those 2 populations. And then the second question, I'll just throw it out all at the beginning, is you mentioned that you're taking an approach that may actually help, well, in some ways help, in some ways hinder with these 2 populations, which is we don't report, we support. Doesn't actually do it. But I wonder if in Canada there is any type of legal requirement, that what we would call a duty to warn, where are there certain circumstances where things come up where you would have to report whatever your outlook for setting up this system is from the outset?
Thank you so much, Matthew. So first question, as I absolutely agree with you that there is a challenge of buying in. And what we started doing, I mean, we have not got the project yet, just a letter that the project has been approved. But we have started working, connecting people from both the groups, administrators and parents and guardians. So we do have association here. And during our first stakeholders meeting, we are very fortunate both the groups came together. So the president of the school administrators in Manitoba and the Parents and Guardian Association president both were present. And we have had 4 hours of discussions. And it seemed that we have somehow overcome the first hurdles of convincing them to stay with us. And they have kind of assured that they will stay with us. But they are, of course, as you said, different opinions in terms of the definition of it, in terms of the phenomena of it. And most importantly, which is connected with the second question, the parents and guardians they are very much interested to see how do we intervene. And as you rightly said that in Canada, now answering your second question here, in Canada, we don't have any legal obligation to report. We don't. It is totally up to citizens' conscience and good citizenship, I would say, to flag something seem abnormal. Especially in the case of Aaron Driver, it happened, and the teacher who used to teach Aaron Driver, she was in our meeting for many hours, and she was right in the but the case was a little complicated because Mr. Aaron was absolutely a different, very docile student, had no symptoms of radicalization. So I'm going summarizing both the questions of Matthew that we are trying hard and we'll continue strive to buy in with this parents group and the administrators group. And in the subsequent meetings, that would be pretty clear how much cooperation we are going to get from them. And reporting wise is pretty sensitive matter. In some of the interviews, I was asked, okay, how will you report? So right from the get-go, I'm saying that we are not in the business of reporting. However, yes, we do. If we encounter something, then we'll follow the existing laws of Canada to flag it and bring it to appropriate authorities' attention if that is what is needed.
All right, I've got a bunch more questions, but there are a bunch already that have come in. It's a sign of a great presentation. So let's just jump straight into them. First participant asks, thank you for a great talk. How do we know programs work as they are intended? I always think of Khurram Butt, London Bridge attack. He was a graduate of a de-radicalization program. What types of measures and metrics are you using to assess your program and to see whether your programs will be effective?
So thank you very much. It's a wonderful question. Right from day one, we are using a matrix, basically survey technique. We have already surveyed to our educators, those who are core group, 15 of them. The survey that we initialized, asking them how much their knowledge is in terms of signs and symbols of extremism and the use of digital literacy, than their intention of using it in the classrooms. So we are going to continue this survey. We'll do 3 surveys basically. One is which we have already done in the first session, then in the middle, and then at the end of it. And in addition to our own evaluation system, we are also getting a lot of assistance from another project that public safety funded is called CPN Prev Impact, run from UCAM in Montreal. So this whole group from the outside coming in to evaluate our effectiveness of these things. So just to clarify one thing is that we are not coming out with a de-radicalization or counter-radicalization project of XYZ incarcerated or, let's say, earmarked as a radical and then one. So our target group is basically teachers, educators. And after the second phase, what we intend to do, we are going to run a broader survey of a larger group of educators, around 500 of them, and ask them what they have learned and does it help them to actually deal with these topics of extremism in the class in front of their students. Thank you.
Sorry, having a hard time getting off my mute button. So the purpose is not to de-radicalize, it's to educate the educators and enable them to have conversations in class. Are these conversations in class intended to be incorporated into the regular curriculum, or is this some type of an inject, a specialized curriculum that will be, assuming administrators buy in, added and woven in, but not kind of organically into the regular social studies curriculum?
Thank you, Matthew. Another brilliant question. And this is in our mind right from day one. How do we really sustain this body of works? Because if you are aware of a group from Vancouver, CASIS, CASIS. So I had a long discussion with them. So they did a lot of work in terms of preparing a workbook, and they intended to give it to educators, and in turns educator would use them in the class. But at the end of the day, when they approached the British Columbia government, the government said that no, we don't have a problem of radicalization, so we don't need it. So end of the project. So this is why our aim is, once we are done after second year, we are going to actively pursue Manitoba, the Directorate of Education or Education Ministry per se. So we have had initial discussion with the Minister of Education and some of former colleagues in that department, those who worked as a consultant, because yes, my basic vision is to incorporate it within curricula. It must be embedded and supported by the Minister of Education for the public schools. And I also intend, and I strongly advocate, that it must not be only for the social science teachers and their responsibility to talk. It is the responsibility of all of them. And I'm not sure at this point how the modus operandi will look like in the future, but I do strongly advocate in this way that it should be embedded and a compulsory item in terms of teaching part of the curricula, so that everybody can use it and have to use it, sort of thing. So it's a long road to go, but we aim to do that, and we are working on it. We are already in the discussion with the ministry and the city officials as well. Thank you.
Super. So this segues nicely to George Karwani's question concerning educator challenges. He has kind of a two-part question. First, is the pushback from teachers, from school administration officials, and parents about equal? Have you had more pushback from one group or another? And then second, in addressing the concerns of these groups, so what's the strategy? Should they be done in a particular order? Parents first, administrators second? Should they all be addressed at the same time? Like, I think people are, recognizing some of the challenges you face, which is one reason why it's so amazing you've taken this on. So what's your strategy? What's been your strategy for how to kind of build this buy-in?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Another brilliant question. Thank you for that. So our fundamental strategy is to talk, engage. And just because of our homework in the first meeting, at least the leaders of both the groups, administrators and parents, guardians, were there with us. They have listened, and they have taken the ideas and concepts, whatever we have discussed, and we have allowed them another month or two to share within their group. And we have invited them again in early May, and we are waiting to see how they, how they've taken these ideas and what do they think in terms of collaborating in our project. So far, all the signs are positive because we have seen their enthusiasm staying with us for 4 hours at a stretch. Second point, if you are really asking me that priority-wise, the challenging sectors, I would say the parents and guardians, that this group is most challenging to buy in terms of convincing them that there is a problem here in our society about extremism and violence. There's another, I would say, reason for the parents and guardians, because they want to know if their children will be flagged, because many of them have heard about channel program in the UK and the referral, the process that UK introduced, and which was kind of backfired quite a bit. So they are worried that if my child would be flagged for some reason, some behavior, some expression, and how do you deal that? So they have raised these questions in our first meeting. For the administrator side, I would say second tier of resistance, it mostly comes from they would like to know that if they are covered legally, if they are covered by the province in terms of saying that fine, you can talk about these things without any legal repercussions or human rights complaints, something like that. So there, I've seen that they are more or less bothered about legal aspects and legal protection. Otherwise, on principle, I have seen most of them are agreed that yes, this needs to be discussed. And from the educators, yes, at this point, you are right. We are mostly grouped with the social science teachers, those who actually are interested. But as I said, we are going to talk to larger group of rest of the teachers teaching physics, chemistry, etc., etc. Because as I said, our vision is to include them because this is the topic that we will encounter every day in our life in the I don't know how many years down the road. Thank you.
So you mentioned at one point in passing, as context about the population, that Manitoba has the second highest concentration of Indigenous population, Indigenous Canadians. How does that factor into what you're doing? Is the Indigenous community uh, more interested in a program like this because maybe they are targets of white supremacy? Are they concerned maybe because some members of these communities are lower socioeconomic brackets and they're concerned that their children might get caught up in stuff? Is that a mixture of both? How I imagine this is a big issue for you, but explain it to us a little bit more.
Thank you. Thank you. Another brilliant question here, Matthew. So yes, this is one of our aspects of the project, including Indigenous population into the discussion of extremism prevention. Demographically, yes, we have the second largest off-reserve Indigenous brothers and sisters living with us in the cities. So naturally, there is a flashpoint between Indigenous versus non-Indigenous. And I just, in an umbrella term, I'm using non-Indigenous. It includes everyone. So there is already a tension there. And this tension is manifested in terms of lots of demonstration. You have seen the toppling down of the statue, Queen Victoria statue in front of the legislative building. And of course, there is a larger, perception of discrimination and years of colonial oppression. So that is already there. And this is why we included this whole group and their leaders with us. And we have with us one of the professors who is an Indigenous person himself and a very bright person. So he's going to advise us that what are the components we really want which will address extremism and violence against Indigenous people amongst the young population. And let's not make a mistake here that in Canada, we have already, I would say, existing tension, and we have gone through truth and reconciliation. You might be well aware of it. And Justice Murray Sinclair's, nearly 100 recommendations talk about how to reconcile with the past and our Indigenous population with the mainstream. So this is what we think important in our project, and we are definitely very much willing to understand how Toolkit will accommodate some of the things that is used against our Indigenous population by rest of the others.
Super. The next question that came in asks about the issue of gender. So as you're thinking about your toolkit, is there an idea of kind of tailoring things a little bit in terms of gender? Because some of the push and pull processes might look different for male and female students in terms of the recruitment narratives, social limitations of engaging women if it's deemed somehow inappropriate. How do gender issues fit into the program you're building?
Absolutely. So this is absolutely inherent in our project structure. And if you visit our website and our advisory group and educators group, you'll find over 70% are our advisors and educators are female. And we do take the gender perspective very seriously. So in terms of the mechanism and toolkit, what we are trying to bring the issues, particularly targeting women, because we have seen foreign fighters, living from Canada, a large group from Quebec, CEJP. So keeping those things in mind, we are incorporating the techniques that recruiters use to particularly towards female. And we have one of the advisors who actually worked in this area for many years, and she has brought a lot of ideas and concepts how we actually incorporate some of the things that targets vulnerable young females. And one of the important aspects in our toolkit with regards to female and their support in order to protect them from extremism, we are going to talk more details in the workshops. When we go out with our initial toolkit, we expect that a lot of educators living outside rural Manitoba, outside the Winnipeg city itself, they're going to talk quite a bit about gender aspects of the extremism and violence prevention, and possibly at the end of second phase we'll have much clearer idea about the components of toolkit specifically targeting gender matters.
Super. All right, we got a bunch more questions. There's a real strong preponderance of questions direct messaged into me today. That's interesting, but we got a lot of good ones. People are loving your presentation, Kawser. Thanks so much, blah, blah, blah. You noted that some teachers worry about stirring up quote unquote controversy. In the United States, particularly far-right extremism can be a touchy subject, with people and politicians on the right complaining about lack of attention to far-left extremism. Have you seen a similar pushback in Manitoba, in particular in Canada in general? How politicized is this space?
Heavily, in one word, heavily. So I might have shared or should have shared with you the Reddit comments that I received after my first interview on 3rd of January. I spoke quite at length with CBC, which is our national CBC Broadcasting Corporation. So they published a lengthy interview. So after that, I received some 400, 500 hate emails. So it is there. I mean, there is no denying fact that that is the reality. And especially in Manitoba, the university where I teach, it is kind of perceived as left-leaning. And people have written quite extensively about their concern that this project would it be targeting overwhelmingly the right or white right alternate group, white supremacist group. What about the anti-fascist group? What about the left groups, those who also propound violence in terms of their objectives? So my answer to this question is that violence in all forms, left, center, or right, is our target to address. Because at the end of the day, through the project, what we are trying to do is to tell and educate the teachers that this is what is violence. Whether it has left-leaning or left attachment to the left politics or right or center, it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, we really don't want our young people to grow up in an environment of hostility, division, polarization. And particularly talking about Canada, the aspects of multiculturalism, it is really important that we should understand to tolerate, engage, and accept different ideas coming from different spectrum. It does matter. And let me be officially sharing with you, I intend to engage Antifa group that we have in our province. I have had already 1-2 sessions with them, and I'm going to invite them to our sessions, openly discuss about their methodology of engaging, they call it fascist groups. So this kind of discussion is very much needed, and I'm willing to take this risk. Yes, there will be resistance, but this is my challenge of this project. Thank you.
No good deed goes unpunished, Kawser. This is another good segue to the next question, which is about digital literacy, which you've mentioned a few times. But can you tell us if there is and what type of a digital literacy component you envision, both for kind of the first phase, which is engagement with and training the trainer for educators, but then to incorporate into the toolkit for use with students?
Thank you so much. Super brilliant question again here. So digital literacy is our one of the main aspects of education of the educators. What we are trying to do now here is to bring in experts. For example, one of our advisors, she's in this area for decades. Her name is Marian Sirili. So she is willing to come in and develop a module of education for these things. But in general, very in a general way, let me tell you what we would like to do. We would like to enable the educators to differentiate between fake news and original news, to understand critically, check the sources, fact check. And of course, when our app is developed, I hope they will be more, it will be more convenient for them to connect with us and double check about the, some of the aspects. So this critical thinking ability and fact checking and checking this whole story behind it, because there are so much of conspiracy theories nowadays that we encounter each day, every day, and especially we have seen it after the Freedom Convoy movement, the abundance of these ideas, and each session actually we discuss about one or two ideas of conspiracy theories, and just dispel these things with the with authentic information. So this is in general our idea, and we have that whole training component built in our workshop to go over the digital literacy skills and the couple of basic tools that we are going to use for training the educators down the road. Thank you.
Definitely put in a link to an FBI teen awareness program in case that's useful.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
and if you haven't noticed, Lauren's been putting in appropriate links to things that Kawser's been mentioning throughout,
Thank
so
you.
that
Thank you.
that material, the CBC interview and all that is available too. So thank you.
And Matthew,
Lauren.
just I totally kind of skipped one aspect about the gender question. So just to share with the audience here that our second speaker or the expert speaker was Elisa Hattegan. If you know her story from Canada. So she's also our advisor, and she's super enthusiastic to support our work without any kind of expectation. So this is why we have brought her, because her story is important, and also to understand the changed landscape of gender recruitment, especially the female recruitment in the extremist landscape. Thank you. Sorry, Matthew.
No, not at all. So glad you mentioned it. So we have time, I think, for one more question, and that question is the following. One of the most well-known incel attacks was in Canada, in Toronto in 2018. Is incel violence something you've seen in Manitoba? Are incel terms and symbols included in your materials? How much of an issue is this in terms of the radicalization and extremism issues you're facing in Winnipeg?
So in Winnipeg and Manitoba in general, we have not seen anything in that line so far. As you rightly mentioned, we have had only one attack in Toronto, and Mr. Minesian, and if you have observed his testimony, or not testimony actually, his interrogation, I have had the opportunity to listen to him quite intently. So these kind of things are in Manitoba. We have not seen the direct manifestation, but we know in the social media we have seen some of the discussions going on in that line, but we have not seen anything directly here so far or recorded so far. But in terms of our tool kit and guidebook, definitely incel related violence and their ideologies will be incorporated, because we do think that anti-feminist ideas, and especially today I started with the case of Malmö in Sweden, because you have seen that in particular that attack where two of the teachers died, unfortunately, and the people were mentioning about this idea of anti-feminism. And that is why we think it's important. And incel ideology is going to stay with us. And we have to really be careful and make people aware that this is nothing extremely weird. It is something that we have to really understand and then deal with it.
Thank you, Kawser, so much. So Stephanie posits a question, which we're not going to have time to get into today, but Stephanie, maybe follow up with me. This is a great question, maybe to do an event about. People know good references or resources on differentiating between those who espouse violent ideology ultimately to make themselves feel better, and those who act on it. And I'd take the liberty of adding, on this sometimes slippery slope between the two. Kawser, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for doing it, and thank you for your patience and perseverance as we have had to navigate weather at your end and issues at our end to make it happen. Thank you, Lauren, for populating links throughout. People can access those if you want to see some of the background information, and for putting in information about our next event. We're taking a break next week, but we will be back on April 27th for a roundtable with David O'Leary from Department of Homeland Security's CP3. And then the following week, some return victims under the continuing theme of no good deed goes unpunished. You give a good briefing here, you'll get called back again. Kawser, you're going to get called back again.
Thank you so much.
From some friends at RAND, Ted Helmus and company. So we have some great stuff coming up. As always, if you know of other people you think we should hear from, or issues we should hear about, let us know. If you know of other people you think we should be including on the invitation list, please do let us know. In the meantime, be safe, be healthy, and be in touch if there's any way we can be helpful to you. Kawser,
thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.